watch the full story, download the app now.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Newsline Live with me, Neha Khanna. Let's get you all the top stories that we're tracking at this hour. A day after all the 41 workers trapped inside Uttarakhand's Silkyari tunnel were rescued, we have their first reactions. Family members of the workers too, needless to say, have heaved a huge sigh of relief. The trapped workers were placed on stretchers fitted with wheels and pulled out via a 57-meter steel pipe. Prime Minister Narendra Modi praised the courage and patience of the trapped workers. He also hailed the bravery and determination of the rescue personnel. The rat miners were the people who finally were able to cut through the final meters.
मेरा नाम विश्वजीत कुमार वर्मा है।
विश्वजीत, आप 41 मजदूरों में से एक थे। कैसा रहा आपका अंदर का जब आप फंस गए थे, तो क्या दिल में और दिमाग में चल रहा था?
दिल में और दिमाग में हम लोग को कुछ नहीं, जैसे जब ऊपर से गिरा तो हम लोग को थोड़ा महसूस हुआ कि अब निकलने का प्रयास तो हम लोग का तो बंद हो गया, लेकिन धीरे धीरे हमारी नवजुगा इंजीनियरिंग लिमिटेड कंपनी जो है सो हमारी प्रयास में लगे रहे। हर जगह से व्यवस्था की गई, ऑक्सीजन की व्यवस्था, खाना पीने की व्यवस्था, और बाहर से मशीन जो आई, बाहर से मंगाए गए, देश से विदेश से अपना मशीन मंगाए गए, इंडिया से भी मशीन कुछ आए, ऑस्ट्रेलिया से भी कुछ आए, और इंडिया IDRF वाले आए, SDRF वाले आए। वो लोग सब हमारे देशवासियों, भारतवासियों, पूरा हम लोग को प्रयास में निकालने की कोशिश किया। और मुख्यमंत्री हमारा उत्तराखंड का जो है वो हमारे प्रयास में लगे रहे हम लोग को निकालने के लिए, और हमारे झारखंड के भी चीफ मिनिस्टर भी आए, और इधर प्रधानमंत्री, सब हर व्यवस्था की गई।
अच्छा, खाना पीना कैसा पहुंच रहा था?
खाना पीना हम लोग का जो है सो गिरने के बाद हम लोग को 10, 15, 20 घंटे थोड़ा परेशानी हुई। उसके बाद जो पाइप था हम लोग का, पानी का पाइप, उससे हमारा खाना की व्यवस्था की गई, उसी से हम लोग को खाना मिलता था। उसके बाद थोड़ा 10 दिन होने के बाद फिर बाहर से पाइप का एक जो व्यवस्था की गई, उससे हम लोग खाना, काजू किशमिश, बादाम, रोटी, चावल, दाल, जो भी मिला सही सलामत सब चीज की हम लोग को प्राइवेट की गई।
अब परिवार से बातचीत हो रही है? परिवार कैसा है?
परिवार सब ठीक है। अभी परिवार से बात हो रही थी, बाद में माइक लगाया था, उस माइक से हम लोग बात करवाई गई सबका।
मैं उत्तराखंड की जो पहाड़ प्रॉब्लम होती है इसमें फंसा था। हमें वहाँ पे सिर्फ 24 घंटे ही दिक्कत हुई, जिसमें कि खाने को, हवा। उसके बाद हमारी कंपनी ने मेरे को पाइप के द्वारा खाने के लिए काजू, किशमिश, मूढ़ी, जो भी हुआ वो भेजे, और मेहनत करने के बाद 10 दिन के बाद हमें फिर दाल, चावल, रोटी की खाने का मिला। मुझे तो कंपनी से कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, मेरे को वहाँ पे कुछ उतना खास दिक्कत तो नहीं हुई, लेकिन वही है कि जरा दिक्कत हुई 24 घंटे के लिए। और क्या बताऊँगा, अगर मैं स्वस्थ हूँ, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है। मेरा फोटो पास में ही है, मैं बिल्कुल सही हूँ। आप लोग से दुआ है, आपकी मेहनत है, केंद्र सरकार, राज्य सरकार की, जिससे मैं निकल पाया आज आप लोग के सामने हूँ। नहीं तो अंदर क्या होती है तो मैं ही जानता था, और वहाँ जो कैविटी होती थी उससे हमारे 2 दिन जरा प्रॉब्लम तो हुई, बाकी बात कोई दिक्कत नहीं है सर, मैं बिल्कुल ठीक हूँ।
बिल्कुल सुमेरा, मैं सीधे इनसे बात करता हूँ। ये वो लोग हैं जिनकी मैनुअल ड्रिलिंग की चर्चाएं हम बार बार कर रहे हैं। क्या है मैनुअल ड्रिलिंग, क्या कुछ किया आपने? और आपको रेट माइनर्स कहा जा रहा है, कम ऑक्सीजन में आप लोग काम करते हैं, बेहद खराब हालत में आप लोग काम करते हैं। कुछ बताएं अपने काम के बारे में।
हमारे काम के बारे में क्या है जी, हम बहुत जगह काम कर चुके हैं। ये काम हमारे लिए, ये समझ लो, बहुत कठिन भी है और कुछ भी नहीं है। ये तो हम ये समझ के आए, हमारे लिए कुछ भी नहीं था, इसलिए इसमें घुस गए। अगर इसको कठिन समझते ना तो नहीं आते यहाँ पर हम।
मैं आपको देख रहा हूँ, आपकी जगह जगह धूल है, चेहरे पे, बालों के अंदर, कपड़ों के ऊपर काफी धूल है। मुझे बताइए, आपने मुझे बताया कि जब आप अंदर गए और सबसे पहले आप लोग उनसे मिले, जब उन्होंने आपको देखा, उनके चेहरे के हाव भाव कैसे थे, क्या कुछ उन्होंने
खुश हो गए, वो एकदम हल्ला मचाने लगे, हमें देखकर बहुत खुश हो गए वो।
गले लग रहे थे, हमको उठा लिया, हाँ उठा रहे थे हमको।
ठीक है, तो वो आप लोगों के लिए कैसा पल था, क्योंकि आप लोगों को भी कई घंटों बाद सक्सेस मिली, आप लोगों को आपके हृदय में किस तरह की भावना थी?
हम अपना सारा काम भूल गए थे, जितनी हमने मेहनत करी सब भूल चुके थे। उनको देखने के बाद जितने वो खुश थे ना, उनसे ज्यादा हम खुश हो गए थे।
ठीक है, उनकी तबीयत कैसे थी भैया, ये बताइए, उनकी तबीयत कैसी?
तबीयत बढ़िया थी सर उनकी, हाँ जी,
एकदम फिट।
ठीक है,
हाँ, उनके लिए खाना पीना वहाँ पर स्टॉक भी रखा हुआ था, बिल्कुल।
On the 12th of November, a section of the tunnel between 205 and 260 meters from the Silkyara site collapsed. Workers who were beyond the 260-meter mark were trapped with their exit blocked. Uttarakhand Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami has announced financial aid for these workers. It was a tiresome and grueling 17-day operation that kept the authorities on their toes. Prayers were offered to the local deity outside the tunnel, with even foreign tunnel experts joining in. Officials described the final moment of the rescue.
There have been so many people working day and night and working hard for the rescue operation that was going on inside the Silkyara Barkot tunnel. And right now we have with us, आपका नाम बताइए?
दौदीप, मेरा नाम दौदीप खाड़ा।
अच्छा, ये क्या है, क्या करते थे आप अंदर?
ये एक्चुअली क्या है, ये टोटल एक कैमरा है, ये एक वीडियो रिकॉर्ड करता है, स्टिल फोटो खींच सकता है।
ये क्या है?
ये कैमरा है, ये एक्चुअली कैमरा है।
दिखाएंगे कैमरा, इस तरफ देखिए, ये कैमरा है, ये एंडोस्कोपिक कैमरा है क्या?
हाँ, ये एक्चुअली फ्लेक्सी प्रो भी बोलता है हम लोग एक्चुअली। तो ये सामने लगा रहा होता है, ये वायर है, ये वायर को मैनुअली डालना पड़ता है अंदर। तो 60 से 100 मीटर का पास से, ठीक है, 60 से 100 मीटर डाल के हम लोग पहली बार देखा ये कैमरा से। ये फ्लेक्सी प्रो कैमरा और ये है मॉनिटर, फ्लेक्सी प्रो कैमरा का मॉनिटर। इसमें टोटल चीज़ रिकॉर्ड होता है, क्या कैसे कैसे हम लोग, वो लोग सही सलामत है क्या नहीं है, इसमें रिकॉर्ड होता था। और सब लोग आके देख के उसका नेक्स्ट स्टेप क्या।
माइक्रोस्कोप, ऐसा कुछ स्पीकर वगैरह डाला हुआ था अंदर?
वो तो अलग से SDRF टीम डाला था, ठीक है।
अच्छा, लेकिन ये पहली जो शॉट्स आए थे वो इस कैमरे से आए थे, इस कैमरे से आए थे, जो एंडोस्कोपिक कैमरा थे।
इस कैमरा का जरिए आया था।
ये पूरी वायर जो थी ये सारी अंदर गई थी, इसमें आपने लगाया था और इसमें ऑडियो आ रहा था।
ऑडियो, हाँ, ऑडियो वीडियो, हाँ, दोनों आ रहा था। सबके साथ बातचीत हुआ, वो लोग सही सलामत हुआ है, वो हम लोग पहली बार देखा और सबको खुश हुआ। और इतना बड़ा रेस्क्यू
किस दिन हुआ था ये?
वो 10 दिन पहले, वो जिस दिन पहला बार आया था, वो तस्वीर एग्जैक्टली मेरे को डेट याद नहीं है, उस दिन आया था।
उस दिन से लेकर आप यहाँ पे ही थे, ये लेके रोज इसी से बात हो रही थी?
कंटिन्यू बात हो रहा था और वीडियो भी दिख रहा था, ठीक है। वो मजदूर ने, मतलब लेबर लोग सही है, सही सलामत है बोल के हम लोग दिखा पाया। तो ये रेस्क्यू ऑपरेशन का पार्ट बन के हम लोग को बहुत खुश महसूस हो रहा है।
तो कौन ऑपरेट कर रहा था इसको?
मैं ऑपरेट कर रहा था, हाँ। एक्चुअली हमारा टीम है ये।
अच्छा,
ये हम लोग LNT से आए हैं, ये हम लोगों का टीम है। तो टोटल हम लोग टीम ऑपरेट कर रहा था
जी। जब आपने देखा, बात करते हुए देखा, तो आपको खुद को कैसा लगा?
बहुत खुशी महसूस हुई मैडम। जो अंदर का मजदूर वगैरह है, पहले तो उनका कुछ तस्वीर वगैरह मिल नहीं रहा था, इसके माध्यम से हमको वो तस्वीर मिला। उनके चेहरे पे भी आनंद आया कि हमको भी कोई बचाने आने वाला है। हम भी खुश हुए कि हम एक इस रेस्क्यू टीम का पार्ट बन सके, ऐसे बहुत खुशी हुई है।
आपका नाम क्या है?
सिद्धांत सर।
आपने देखा इतना बड़ा रेस्क्यू ऑपरेशन था, इतनी दिक्कतें थी, इतनी परेशानी थी, उसके बाद आप एक जरिया बने कि उनसे पहली बार बात हो पाए और ये पता चले कि वो सब सही है अंदर।
जी मैम, बहुत खुशी हुई इस बात की तो, कि हम एक जरिया थे उन तक पहुंचने का। बाकी सब टीम ने वैसे ही काम किया है और बढ़िया था सब।
इस रेस्क्यू ऑपरेशन से आप कुछ सीखे हैं, कुछ चेंज आया आपके अंदर, कुछ बदलाव आया?
हाँ, मतलब बदलाव तो ऐसा है, मतलब ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए। मतलब हो गया एक, ये एक्सीडेंट है, एक्सीडेंट मतलब दोबारा नहीं हो, ये सबको ख्याल रखना पड़ेगा। एक्सीडेंट दोबारा नहीं हो बोल के, ठीक है। इतना आदमी फंस गया था अंदर, ठीक है। इसको रेस्क्यू करना भी बहुत बड़ा एक चैलेंजेस था सबके पास। तो ये नेक्स्ट टाइम से नहीं होना है, मतलब ये थोड़ा ध्यान रखना है बस, और कुछ नहीं।
तो जो भी लोग, the people who have worked here in the rescue operation, they know how difficult it was for them to rescue all the 41 trapped people who were trapped inside the tunnel. So this is the instrument, this is the camera through which you can place the camera here, and this is the wire that went inside the 6-inch pipe, and then the first images that we could see of the laborers trapped inside through this endoscopic camera. This camera was responsible for those pictures, the first pictures that we had got from inside the tunnel of all the laborers inside.
In other news, the division bench of the Karnataka High Court has allowed Deputy Chief Minister D.K. Shivakumar to withdraw his appeal challenging the single bench order of the court. The court had earlier quashed his plea challenging the then government's decision to sanction CBI probe against him in a disproportionate assets case. The appeal was withdrawn after the Advocate General informed the court about the Cabinet's decision to withdraw permission for the CBI to conduct a probe against Shivakumar. The Supreme Court, as it has observed earlier in the Punjab matter, has said the power of the governor cannot be utilized to pause the lawmaking exercise of the legislature. The Supreme Court said the Kerala governor, after the institution of these proceedings, has exercised power by granting assent to 1 bill, and 7 bills have been reserved for consideration by the President.
The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
The war between Israel and Hamas has now entered the 54th day. Let's get you all the latest updates. Today is the last day of the Israel-Hamas truce. Israel has freed 30 more Palestinians as Hamas released 10 Israeli hostages and 2 hostages from other countries. The CIA and Mossad chiefs, meanwhile, have met with the Prime Minister of Qatar to discuss a possible extension of this 6-day truce. Hamas, meanwhile, has accused Israel of blatant breach of the ceasefire in northern Gaza. Israel raided the Jenin refugee camp in the West Bank. Israel's far-right security minister has urged Prime Minister Netanyahu to now end the truce. The Israeli military is using the truce to strengthen its readiness. That's what the Israeli Defense Forces spokesperson has said. Meanwhile, Elon Musk has promised to wear a symbol of Gaza hostages. More than 14,800 Palestinians have now been killed in the Gaza war. More than 6,000 of these were children, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. It's the last day of the Israel-Hamas truce. 12 hostages are back in Israel in the latest exchange. The hostages include 10 Israelis and 2 foreign nationals from Thailand. In fact, the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas and allied group the Islamic Jihad freed these 12 hostages on Tuesday, bringing the total number of those released to 81. Hamas and Israel were expected to release more hostages and prisoners on Wednesday, which was the last day of a prolonged 6-day truce in the Gaza Strip conflict. The Israeli media has reported that Israel received a list of hostages who are expected to be released later today. Israel has said the truce could be extended further provided Hamas continues to free at least 10 hostages per day. The leaders of the CIA and Israel's intelligence agency Mossad have met with Qatar's Prime Minister in Doha. This meeting took place on Tuesday to discuss the next phase of a potential deal in the ongoing ceasefire in Gaza. Here's a report.
12 more hostages were released by Hamas on Tuesday in their ongoing ceasefire with Israeli forces. Israel's military confirmed that 10 Israeli citizens and 2 foreign nationals were on its territory. This Hamas video is said to show the handover to the Red Cross. 30 Palestinian prisoners were released by Israel in exchange. This began as a 4-day truce, was extended to 6 days, and now it's possible that it could stretch even further. A source has told Reuters that the heads of the CIA and Israeli intelligence met with Qatar's prime minister in Doha over what was described as the next phase of a potential deal. Egyptian officials were also present. The total number of hostages released by Hamas stands at 81 as of Tuesday. The 60 Israelis freed are all women and children. The reunions have been tearful and joyous for some families on both sides. Others don't know the fate of their loved ones.
Maybe it's part of a psychological war against us. I have no idea. It's working really good because the last 4 days has been completely nightmare for us.
Ofri Bibas has been pressing for the return of her brother's family, which includes the youngest of those taken by the Islamist militants. Kafir Bibas is only 10 months old.
My only brother was kidnapped with his entire family from their home in New Oz on the 7th. His wife Shiri and 2 boys. Not today. The reason we are talking to you today is because tomorrow is the last day of the current ceasefire and the current deal that Israeli have for releasing hostages. And they are still haven't been released.
Israel has said it's open to continuing the extended ceasefire further if Hamas continues to release at least 10 hostages per day. But with dwindling numbers of women and children in captivity, extending it beyond Wednesday may require Hamas to release some male hostages for the first time.
Israeli forces and Hamas terrorists engaged in a clash in northern Gaza on Tuesday in what was described by both sides as a violation of the ongoing ceasefire or humanitarian pause in the fighting. The Israel Defense Forces claimed it detonated 3 explosive devices near Israeli troops at 2 different locations. The IDF said at one of these occasions the terrorists opened fire at the troops, who then responded immediately. A number of soldiers were injured during these incidents. Meanwhile, Hamas has accused Israel in a statement issued on the Telegram channel of a clear violation of the truce agreement, calling the clashes a field skirmish and a violation that fighters dealt with. Hamas in its statement said it is committed to the truce as long as the enemy is committed to it. The Islamist terrorist organization also called on mediators to pressure the occupation, as they put it, to adhere to all the terms of the truce on the ground and in the air. The IDF, meanwhile, claimed several soldiers were slightly hurt and after being attacked by Hamas in the northern Gaza Strip. The Israeli Defense Forces have announced the death of 3 of their soldiers who were kidnapped by Hamas during the deadly attack on southern Israel on the 7th of October. The soldiers have been identified as Staff Sergeant Tomer, Sergeant Kirill and Sergeant Shaked. The military's chief rabbi declared the soldiers' deaths based on various findings that have been obtained by the IDF. The 3 have been listed as fallen soldiers held hostage by a terror group. Their deaths bring the toll of fallen IDF soldiers to 395. A plume of black smoke was seen rising above the obliterated wasteland of northern Gaza war zone from Israel. However, there was no sign of any jets in the sky. The 2 sides reported a few Israeli tank fire in the Sheikh Radwan district of Gaza in the morning. However, there were no immediate reports of casualties. The IDF said after suspects approached the troops, an IDF tank fired a warning shot. At COP28, the primary challenge is the global stocktake, where nations worldwide convene to evaluate efforts in combating climate change. The focus is on assessing past actions and charting a course to limit global warming to 1.5 or 2 degrees as agreed in the Paris Agreement. Acknowledging the current trajectory falls short, COP28 aims to formulate a comprehensive plan to guide countries towards meeting these crucial climate goals.
Here are the key issues countries will discuss at the COP28 Climate Summit in Dubai. The biggest task facing COP28 is the global stocktake. That's the name of a process where nearly all countries in the world get together and assess their progress towards tackling climate change. They'll look at what they've already done and what they need to do to get on track to limit global warming to 1.5 or 2 degrees, which countries agreed to do under the Paris Agreement. Countries already know they're not on track for either of those goals, so the task facing COP28 is to get together a plan to bring countries towards those targets. One of the toughest issues facing the COP28 talks is the future of fossil fuels, and countries will discuss whether to agree for the first time to phase out the use of coal, oil and gas. Around 80 countries are heading to COP28 asking for a deal on phasing out fossil fuels, including the US, the EU, and climate-vulnerable small island states. However, other countries are opposed. The G20 failed to agree on this issue at a meeting earlier this year, and countries including Russia have publicly said they will oppose a phase-out deal. The issue is particularly prominent at this year's COP because COP28 takes place in the United Arab Emirates, a major oil producer. The head of the climate talks this year, Sultan Al Jaber, is also the head of the country's oil and gas company.
To phase out emissions.
But countries are waiting to see if he will push other oil-rich nations at COP28 to agree to a fossil fuel phase-out. Finance is a major issue at every UN climate summit, and it's particularly high on the agenda at COP28 because there countries will try to launch a new climate damage fund to help vulnerable countries with the costs they're suffering from climate impacts. The EU and the US have both said that they will contribute to this fund at COP28, but how much, we don't yet know. They are also pressuring countries like China and the UAE to also contribute to the fund. Other issues countries will discuss at COP28 include pledges to triple renewable energy this decade and what role carbon capture technologies should play in meeting climate goals.
As the global community grapples with the urgent need to combat climate change, all eyes are on the upcoming COP28 UN Climate Summit that is set to begin in Dubai from tomorrow till the 12th of December. So what can we expect? Here's a report.
Each country has its own agenda for the nearly 200 nations gathering at COP28 in Dubai. And finding consensus is a challenge as UN climate negotiations need unanimous support to pass. Here are some of the climate summit's main players and what they're looking for. China, the world leader in both clean and dirty energy. It's responsible for 30% of annual global emissions, making it the world's biggest greenhouse gas emitter. But it also has more renewable energy capacity than anywhere else. China has been feeling the impacts of climate change through heat waves, floods, and extreme drought. Despite having the world's second largest economy after the US, it sees itself as a developing nation in climate talks and argues wealthy, developed nations like the US should move first and fastest in policy and finance. It's part of the bloc of basic countries alongside South Africa, Brazil, and India, who argue the same. The United States is the world's second largest emitter. It comes to COP28 a year into rolling out a $369 billion plus subsidy package for electric vehicles and other green products. Its Inflation Reduction Act is expected to triple the country's clean energy capacity by 2030. But U.S. delegates will face pressure at COP28 after Washington pledged no new climate cash to the United Nations this year. It supports a COP28 deal to phase out CO2-emitting fossil fuel use, despite being the world's biggest oil and gas producer. The 27-country European Union is among the most ambitious. The bloc, along with the US, is pushing to triple renewable capacity. It also aims to end new coal-fueled power plants, phase out fossil fuels, and power electricity grids with renewable sources in the 2030s. African countries are pushing for climate finance to speed up green energy projects. But not everyone's on the same page. Some, like Kenya, Ethiopia, and Senegal, have backed calls for phasing out fossil fuel production. Others, like Mozambique, want to develop their reserve of gas to capitalize off European gas demands. But they do agree that any deal on phasing out fossil fuels must allow poor nations to develop reserves in the short term to alleviate energy poverty.
Delegates at this year's UN COP28 Climate Summit are eager to enhance the global climate change agenda by devising concrete strategies to tackle the second most prevalent greenhouse gas, methane. Here's a report.
COP28 is putting a spotlight on methane, the world's second most prominent greenhouse gas. While it has more warming potential than carbon dioxide, methane also breaks down in the atmosphere faster, meaning reining in emissions could have a more immediate impact in limiting climate change. What is needed now is to turn pledges into urgent action, according to the United Arab Emirates COP28 presidency. Here's what you need to know. More than 150 countries signed onto the US and EU-led Global Methane Pledge in 2021. They promised to slash their methane emissions 30% below 2020 levels by the end of the decade. Few have detailed how they will achieve this. The EU has agreed to set methane emission limits on Europe's oil and gas imports from 2030. The US is finalizing its own rules. Canada, meanwhile, is expected to target the sector with a proposal requiring a 70% cut in methane emissions by 2030, sources told Reuters. China, the world's biggest emitter of greenhouse gases, has pledged to include methane in the country's 2035 National Climate Plan. The World Bank is in the process of launching a new fund, with backing from independent oil companies, among others. It would sponsor detection and cleanup programs in developing countries. Some oil and gas companies are already participating in voluntary programs to monitor or reduce their emissions. COP28 host, the United Arab Emirates, wants to see national regulations over methane-emitting sectors and financial support for developing countries. It is also calling on the oil and gas industry to phase out its methane emissions by 2030. Climate experts say getting companies and countries to commit to a binding agreement is key. Last year's methane emissions from the energy industry were slightly higher than the year before.
The head of the International Monetary Fund has called for an end to business as usual ahead of the start of the COP28 climate talks and warned such a route is not viable if the world wants to manage global warming.
The most important thing in COP28 is to be clear that the way we are going is not viable, and define a level of ambition that is likely to keep a chance for the world to live with temperatures not exceeding 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. Between 2019 and 2030, we have to shrink emissions somewhere between 25 and 50%. Whereas all the commitments would give us a meager 11%. So that is, to my mind, the number one priority for this COP is to recognize that business as usual has to be dropped. We need to look at the ability of countries to deal with climate shocks and mitigate, adapt to the new climate economy while they are severely affected by the debt accumulation that became particularly problematic as a result of the consecutive shocks, COVID, war, cost of living crisis. What we are very focused on are two questions. The first one is to differentiate the relatively small, thankfully small number of countries where debt distress is already present. And for these countries, for 7 of them, there is ongoing restructuring process. There are a couple of countries where we need to find a way to support them to reduce that burden of debt. You ask me where we are. Well, we now have exceeded the 100 billion target. We have at the IMF already $55 billion on lending for the Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust and $41 billion for the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. We have gotten our membership to agree on 50% quota increase, which is a very significant boost to our predictable financial resources. We got our membership to support us with subsidies so we can expand lending to low-income countries through our zero interest rate instrument, the Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust.
Sri Lanka aims to achieve net zero emissions by 2040, requiring an estimated $100 billion as revealed by President Ranil Wickremesinghe amidst the country's severe financial crisis. Emphasizing climate resilience, the country plans to leverage green financing tools such as debt for nature swaps to meet this target. However, immediate utilization of green bonds isn't currently part of the plan.
We feel that Sri Lanka has potential for export of renewable energy. We are having connectivity with India for this purpose, but there also seems to be a lot of excess capacity as far as green hydrogen is concerned. We are working on it. I think we can easily be an exporter of green hydrogen. Know by early next year what the outcome is. They look very serious on it to work on the numbers. Green finances, we are into it, which includes debt for nature swaps. But we will also have to find a fair amount of investments if Sri Lanka is to achieve its targets, and we are trying to go in for net zero, if possible by 2040. If you can find the money, we require about $100 billion over this period. And the officials, the rest are basically the private. Some will come from investors who are interested in it, and I think we have an early start compared to others, and we'll be inviting foreign investments. Rest, let's hope our economy is picked up and we have sufficient money to put into it. Other than that, on the island one, so Nasheed has been there, he came in. Yes, we hope to put two proposals out. Actually there will be 3. 2 are regional. One is the tropical belt. Tropical belt has virtually 40% of the world. It has the largest number of forests. 2030 we will have about 50% of the world population. So let's fix it in the tropical belt. That also has an impact.
Biotech company Interstellar Labs says their controlled environment capsule would not only make agriculture more sustainable, but it could also open the door for crops to one day be grown in space.
Imagine a way to grow fresh produce anywhere in the world, no matter the season or the weather. Biotech company Interstellar Lab says it's possible. They say their controlled environment capsule would not only make agriculture more sustainable, but it could also open the door for crops to one day be grown in space. This is the BioPod. It was inspired by space technologies to offer a totally sealed production system. That means it can grow plants much more efficiently than a traditional greenhouse. Barbara Belvisi founded the company in 2018.
BioPod is like a super advanced greenhouse that will collect CO2 from the atmosphere, recycle the water, fully optimize the conditions. So not only we will accelerate plant growth, but more specifically will trigger the production of specific molecule inside the plant. When you do that, you use less resources, you have less impact, CO2 impact on, buying flowers from another country, bringing it to another country and make the extraction. So it's trying to give a tool for farmers to relocalize production. And by this very large range of climate that we can do, then allowing them to grow plants they usually cannot grow.
The biopod is about 16 feet tall with a surface area of almost 600 square feet. A combination of technologies ensures a balance of climate, nutrition, and light conditions. It also uses AI-based management and monitoring software. Biopod's unique ellipsoid shape helps with airflow, heating, and cooling, and also makes it rapidly deployable. It requires no foundation or access to water. Belvisi says the company is working with NASA to design a cube for use in space and another version for the moon.
Over time, food will degrade in space, so NASA was looking for a solution to grow mushroom, insects, vegetables, some microgreens, and that's what we've been designing. So really focusing on recreating the climate so we can cover some of the gaps of the astronaut in space.
Keeping astronauts well-nourished for extended periods has long posed a challenge for NASA. The need for self-contained, low-waste food production requiring minimal resources has become more important as the space agency sets its sights on the moon and beyond.
I don't believe in Plan B. There is only one plan, which is Plan A, which is the Earth. And we learn how to preserve life on Earth, and then this technology can help preserving it here and then bring it to space. But space is not an escape of the Earth. Mars is not a very habitable planet, so we're going to go there to explore, but the Plan A is our planet.
Belvisi is heading to Dubai for this year's UN climate conference to drum up interest in the project and seek investors. The firm plans to sell each unit for $350,000 once it's commercialized.
A Virgin Atlantic passenger jet flying from London to New York, powered by 100% sustainable aviation fuel, took off on Tuesday, with the aviation world closely monitoring the flight. It marks the first time a commercial airline has flown a long-haul flight on 100% SAF. As the world decarbonizes, airlines are banking on fuel made from waste to reduce their emissions by up to 70%, enabling them to keep operating before electric and hydrogen-powered air travel becomes a reality in the decades to come. The flight follows the successful transatlantic crossing by a Gulf Stream G600 business jet using the same fuel last week.
Nobody thought it was going to be possible ever for long-haul airlines to be able to fly on sustainable aviation fuel. Today we hope to prove the skeptics wrong, prove that it can be done, and once we've done it, we then will turn to the fuel industry and say, if you can supply it, we've proven it can be done. If you supply it, we will use it. It's going to take a while before we can get enough fuel where everybody's going to be able to fly, but you've got to start somewhere. And if we didn't prove it could be done, you would never ever get sustainable aviation fuel. If we hadn't proven that you could actually build planes made of carbon fiber, then they wouldn't have happened. So you've got to make these first steps.
I think first of all, this is a nascent industry. We're showing, there's only 0.1% of the world's aviation fuel is manufactured in a sustainable way. So there's 100 to 150 times scale up required to get to 10%. Will prices of fuel go up? It may. And we will have to share it, of course, between the airlines, the customers, the corporations that fly, Virgin Atlantic and other airlines. So I think we will have to see, but it's no doubt that when a new technology is adopted, prices inadvertently rise a bit. But at the end of the day, it's something we must do if we are to decarbonize long-haul aviation.
No, I think we've used some taxpayers' money with private investment to get
our target's to get 5 commercial plants in construction by 2025. We're on track to do that. Just last week I announced £53 million to a range of those that are bidding for the money. So I was meeting some of those delivering that yesterday at the government's Global Investment Summit. So I think we're on track to do that and on track to deliver our legal mandate to start in 2025 as well.
India has set up a high-level inquiry committee to look into allegations pertaining to a conspiracy to kill a Sikh extremist in the US. A report suggests US authorities thwarted a plot to assassinate Panun, a Sikh extremist in the United States. The Financial Times report, citing unnamed sources, said the US thwarted this plot and allegedly warned Indian government over concerns of their involvement in the plot. External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi has said India and the US share inputs with each other and added that India is taking this matter seriously as it concerns our national security as well. He added that India will take the necessary follow-up action based on the findings of the committee. The Japanese Coast Guard reported that a US military V-22 Osprey aircraft crashed near an island in western Japan earlier today with 8 people on board. The tilt-rotor plane, which can fly both like a helicopter and fixed-wing aircraft, is operated by the US Marines, the US Navy and the Japan Self-Defense Forces. Osprey has witnessed numerous accidents over the years. The Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary updated the media about the details of the crash. Let's listen in.
Today at around 2:40 p.m., we received information that a US military Osprey disappeared from radar off the coast of Yakushima in Kagoshima Prefecture. Along with confirming the severity of injuries, rescue efforts are the highest priority for the government.
Donald Trump has pledged to escalate his efforts to tighten immigration policies if he returns to the White House in 2024. Trump has not ruled out the possibility of reinstating his controversial policy of separating families at the US-Mexico border, despite this key allies who might assume roles in Trump's prospective administration as immigration enforcers are exercising caution. According to insights from 5 former Trump officials and conservative associates who've been interviewed, there is apprehension about implementing a revamped version of the 2018 zero-tolerance policy that resulted in the separation of numerous children from their parents at the southwestern border. The sources expressed concern about the potential resurgence of the significant public backlash over the original policy. As the current leading Republican candidate for the 2024 presidential nomination, Trump is making border security a focal point of his campaign yet again. Americans for Prosperity, the political arm of the influential Koch network, formally announced their endorsement of Nikki Haley's candidature. This endorsement brings with it a commitment of extensive support from a nationwide coalition of activists and substantial financial backing. Their aim is to propel Haley ahead of former President Donald Trump in the Grand Old Party's primary contest. The group's focus on defeating Trump stems from their belief that Trump would lose to President Biden in the November 2024 election based on Biden's victory over Trump in 2020. Highlighting internal polling and grassroots feedback, Americans for Prosperity have asserted that Haley, the former US ambassador to the UN, stands as the most viable candidate to challenge and overcome Trump in the Republican primaries. Moreover, their internal data consistently positions Haley as the strongest contender against Joe Biden. In the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia, concerning development has emerged as the wife of Ukraine's intelligence chief has been diagnosed with heavy metals poisoning. Mariana Budanova, the spouse of Lieutenant General Kirilo Budanov, head of the military intelligence agency of Ukraine known as GUR, is currently receiving treatment at a hospital. Reports suggest other agency employees were also exposed but remain asymptomatic. Budanov, renowned for accurately forecasting Russia's full-scale invasion, has survived multiple assassination attempts, including a thwarted car bombing. Finland has announced a 2-week closure of its entire border with Russia to curb a surge in asylum seekers. The government of Finland has cited an unusually high influx of 900 asylum seekers from various countries, including Kenya, Morocco, Pakistan, Somalia, Syria and Yemen, entering from Russia in the month of November.
Desperate humans, one of the hybrid warfare weapons Moscow frequently uses to try to intimidate its neighbors. This time, the deployment of hundreds of inadequately dressed asylum seekers in Finland has prompted the government to close border crossings with Russia.
Even though the numbers have not been so significant on their own, Finland wants to send a clear message that this is not acceptable.
Officials say the latest arrivals admit getting Russian assistance.
Apparently, the route is that they fly or are flown to Moscow, where they get help, probably for a fee.
This reverses long-standing cooperation in which Russian border officials would prevent people without visas from going further. Now they're reportedly driving the groups of mostly young men to the border area, giving them bicycles, although crossing by both bike and foot are banned, and in some cases even physically pushing people across the border if they show reluctance. The Russian government calls such accusations groundless and Finland's border restrictions absurd.
We hope that common sense will prevail in Helsinki, and they will abandon destructive ideas like the total closure of the border.
Helsinki has asked for backup of 60 officers from the European Union's border control agency Frontex.
To Russia we say, we will not let you divide us. To Finland we say, the European Union is behind you.
Under international law, Finland must keep open at least one land route for asylum seekers to lodge applications. When the government closed the 4 crossings in southern Finland, it kept 2 more open to facilitate this process, but warned more countermeasures may be taken. The situation could soon become more difficult, both practically and politically. Even if the number of arrivals doesn't escalate dramatically, the temperature is dropping.
If Russia indeed starts to send people, let's say elderly people, sick people, people who are in bad shape in these weather conditions, who could potentially even die. If that would be the case, that's toxic politically on the Finnish side, and that's going to be a test for resilience.
But opening the gates would also be dangerous.
That also sends the signal that at the end of the day, we can be pressured to do what Russia wants.
By the end of this interview, Henry Vanhanen was getting news alerts that asylum seekers in poor physical condition were indeed turning up at the border, a dilemma for the Finnish government made no less precarious just because it was predictable.
Australia is gearing up to ban disposable vapes in January as part of a crackdown on the rising popularity of nicotine-filled devices amongst the youth. That's been announced by the Health Minister, Mark Butler. March will see an expansion of the ban to encompass all non-therapeutic vapes, requiring importers of medical vapes to obtain permits from the Office of Drug Control. Additionally, a legislative package will allocate an extra 75 million Australian dollars to the Australian Border Force and the Therapeutic Goods Administration to bolster the enforcement of these new regulations.
Next month, the government will be presenting to the Governor-General a regulation for his signature to prohibit the import of all disposable vapes from the 1st of January next year, from New Year's Day. These are the vapes that are deliberately sold to our kids. These are the vapes that have pink unicorns on them, bubblegum flavouring, disguised in order for them to hide them in their pencil cases. This is not a therapeutic good to help hardened smokers kick the habit. This is a good that is deliberately targeted at our kids to recruit them to nicotine addiction and then to cigarette smoking. Still the biggest preventable cause of death in Australia, and we are determined to stamp it out.
Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis has accused his British counterpart Rishi Sunak of cancelling a scheduled meeting amid an ongoing dispute over the Parthenon sculptures, a contentious issue that has strained ties between the two countries for centuries.
Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis accused his British counterpart Rishi Sunak of cancelling a Tuesday meeting in an ongoing row over the Parthenon sculptures, which have been a sore subject between the two countries for centuries. Mitsotakis said in a statement, quote, "I express my annoyance that the British Prime Minister cancelled our planned meeting just hours before it was due to take place." Greece has repeatedly asked Britain to permanently return the 2,500-year-old sculptures. A British diplomat took them from the Parthenon Temple in the early 19th century. Mitsotakis told the BBC on Sunday it was not a question of ownership, but reunification, and that you would not, quote, cut the Mona Lisa in half. When asked about Mitsotakis' statement about the meeting, Sunak's office said Britain's relationship with Greece was, quote, hugely important, and that the countries needed to work together on global challenges. It added that Sunak's deputy was available to meet Mitsotakis to discuss the issue instead. The British government has long ruled out giving up ownership of the marbles and maintains they were legally acquired. The Greek government has been in talks with the British Museum on a possible loan deal, but a spokesperson for Sunak said there were no plans to return the sculptures.
Timothy Chalamet, who's playing a younger Willy Wonka for the Paul King-directed Wonka, is taking on Roald Dahl's iconic and beloved character for the big screen. And to perfect the literary character's vocal inflections, the young actor turned to vocal coach Eric Vitro.
A lot of vocal lessons with Eric Vitro in LA. You might be watching this, maybe, knowing him. But James Taylor, our musical supervisor too. A lot of training, a lot of work. Daunting because the character's beloved. People are very protective over characters they love and skeptical about Hollywood remakes. But I think we did a great job. I'm very happy.
It would stand as a companion piece to the Gene Wilder movie, which obviously has these enduring classic songs like Pure Imagination, the Oompa Loompa song. And once we were able to sort of get our hands on those, you sort of go, well, we want to make a film that feels like that. So hopefully it's a fun, adventurous story, but it's also got great songs at the heart of it, written by Neil Cannon of the Divine Comedy, who's another one of my heroes.
Let's see who knows.
And with that, it's a wrap on the show. Thanks so much for watching.
ChatGPT. It can generate codes and human-like responses